Chapter 11. Empress Yang Shui. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 11. Empress Yang Shui. Translator David T. Editor. Cell Elder Ling. At the side, the emperor finally could not bear to continue sitting on the sidelines, lest this hot-tempered Duke Ling really gets rid of the three grandsons of the Yang family. When that happens, the matter would be irreparable, and even his sky-bearing empire would follow both their family clans and disappear from the face of this earth. No matter what, it was the Empress's fault today. Elder Ling can be assured that I would give Senior an appropriate answer. The Emperor had no other alternatives. He was the monarch of a nation, but he just can't afford to provoke these two old men. He had no choice but to put down his pride and hold his grievances inside his heart. He thought to himself. In all the generations of emperors, I am probably considered the most cowardly and spineless one. Now, there are two people in the court whom I do not dare to provoke. If it wasn't to maintain the stability of this country, why would I bother to suffer such anger? Since the emperor had spoken, even if Ling Zhan was unwilling, he still had to give face to the emperor and back down. After all, he was the emperor. Besides, with all the civil and military officials present, if he were to slap the emperor's face in front of so many people, it would be the end of the line for his family, even if the time has not come. It seemed like Ling Zhan still had to bide his time for the matters of the empress. Furthermore, after the momentary rush of anger, Ling Zhan's head also gradually cleared. He began to find the matters a little too outrageous to believe. Knowing how devious Yang Kong-kun was, how could he resort to carrying out such a joke of a plan? They had competed their whole lives, and Ling Zhan was very clear that this was completely not his style. Thus, he could only shake his head with a face full of depression. The Empress Yang Shui was then escorted by Yang Kong-kun himself back to her palace, since Yang Kong-kun himself was unassured of her safety. As the head of the Yang family, Yang Kong-kun was naturally extremely familiar of the ways his opponent Ling Zhan worked. This guy was naturally lawless and fearless. Even though his daughter might have been crowned empress, in that old fogey's eyes, the title had no meaning. And if it went from push to shove, Ling Zhan would not have any second thoughts. If no one was able to give a satisfactory explanation to the latter for today's incident, with a suitable compensation, it didn't matter that his daughter had the title of empress. Her head would still roll. Before they left, Yang Kong-kun unexpectedly turned his head back to stare directly at Ling Zhan. He spoke in a heavy tone. Ling Zhan, we have fought with each other for our whole lives, you know me as well as I know you. If I really wanted your grandson's life, how would there be such a situation as today's taking place? While I may not be able to take care of your entire Ling family, do you think the life of this little thing would faze me, Yang Kong-kun? Yang Kong-kun was extremely direct and serious in his manner of speech, showing how unbridled he was. As he spoke, all civil and military officials including the emperor were at the scene. Such lawlessness! However, Yang Kong-kun knew that only by doing so could he even have the chance to protect his daughter's life. Only by doing so could he restrain the raging flames of Ling Zhan's anger. Furthermore, although such words seemed to be filled with a bold spirit, this undoubtedly served as a form of explanation to Ling Zhan, and Yang Kong-kun was undoubtedly admitting his weakness. Following this line of thought, this showed that he was admitting his inferiority in his heart. To such a prideful person like Yang Kong-kun, this was worse than death. However, Yang Kong-kun had to do such a thing, because no matter how brash he was, he could not be compared to Ling Zhan, who did not even recognize the heavens if he were to be riled up. This old fogey could literally do anything and everything. Hearing this proclamation from Yang Kong-kun, the emperor's face twitched slightly. However nasty sounding the words were, it was actually the best method for the imperial family. At the very least, both families would not cause any trouble in the near future. However, deep in his heart, the Emperor Long Xiang was feeling terrible. In his life, he had never wanted to exterminate the two unbearably domineering great families as much as today. He was clear that as long as both of them continued thriving, the imperial family's standing would forever not be rock solid and stable. And yet, if one of them were to fall, then the entire sky-bearing empire would follow suit and collapse. It was either that both of them would survive, or if not, both of them would fall. There was no third option. Thus, he could only endure. Having finished what he wanted to say, Yang Kong-kun turned around to leave. Ling Zhan stood with furrowed brows, deep in thought for what seemed like half a day before he suddenly smiled. As though nothing had happened, he exclaimed, "For all of you great lords for making the effort to attend this ceremony today, this old man expresses his utmost gratitude. Especially the emperor, who specially took time off his busy schedule to grace my humble home. This truly makes this little old man's face glow in happiness." At this point, this old man first thanks the emperor for his generosity. As he finished, he sank into a deep bow, bending deeply from above his waist. Long Xiang hurriedly helped him up, saying in a pleasant tone, "Elder is too polite, today's matters leave us in deep embarrassment." Ling Zhan laughed heartily while replying, "You are exaggerating too much, Emperor." At this point, his eyes sparkled as he ordered, "Men, bring up the items. This old man wants to see what kind of interesting item his grandson would pick up, ahaha." The crowd couldn't help but prostrate in admiration of Ling Zhan. Facing such a matter, a normal person would be angered beyond reason. To have one's children suffering from such a shock, most would have already carried their darlings into the inner chambers. However, this Duke Ling here was all frowns and glares one moment, yet as happy as a lark the next moment. This kind of face-changing technique had already reached the point of perfection. He carried on as though nothing had ever happened and even insisted that his grandson carry on with the item choosing. This, coupled with the fact that it seemed like for him to be able to dominate all under the heavens from a young age, as well as to stand strong for 40 over years, he definitely had a thing or two up his sleeves. Some of the officials who had long held disagreements deep in their hearts now silently heaved a sigh of relief. As it turned out, this distracted old man was actually playing a pig to eat the tiger. Thankfully, no one in their class ever dared to step out to challenge him. This was truly wise of them. Judging by this old fox's standard, he would be like those who would make his helpers count the silver he was about to get for selling them. One had to again reassess the abilities of the Ling family. In his heart, Ling Tian felt that his grandfather should have gone to his world to act in an opera theater. However, in actuality, those people had actually overestimated Ling Zhan. Ling Zhan had already held some suspicions that this matter was not carried out by Yang Kong-kun. If one wanted to insist that this was absolutely not a coincidence, then they could only point fingers at his empress's daughter for trying to act smart. If that was the case, he would definitely not take such a short-sighted woman as a matter to be worried about. At this juncture, Yang Kong-kun was sitting with his daughter, Empress Yang Shui, in the carriage, wearing a grave expression. What exactly happened back there? You would normally be more capable of controlling yourself. Yang Shui wanted to cry, but no tears came out, even her own father was also suspecting her. "Father, today's incident was really an accident." Yang Kong-kun scrutinized her face, as though he was scanning her face with some profound method, before speaking, "Continue." Yang Shui finally gained some semblance of calmness, and narrated the incident that happened just now, tearfully saying, "I was suddenly in pain from both my head and chest. How could I not let go?" This caused Yang Kong-kun to furrow his brows and remain silent. At this point, both parent and daughter had the same doubtful thought in their hearts. Who was the exact mastermind behind this? Could it be that there is a hidden fourth powerhouse in sky-bearing empire? Both of them never thought of the baby that caused this fiasco. After all, that was just an infant who would even stutter when calling for his parents. Yang Kong-kun thought for a long while, before saying, "Even if it wasn't you, and even if this whole thing was an accident, this tactic has definitely crossed your mind before, hasn't it?" Yang Shui could only lower her head to signify her agreement. Letting out a deep sigh, Yang Kong-kun remarked bleakly, a woman that has been married out is just like water that has been thrown out. Dad is not blaming you. Instead, it would be stranger if you did not think that way. Letting out another sigh, he seemed to have aged all of a sudden. Yang Shui was naturally intelligent and quickly grasped what her father meant by such a sentence. Although it seemed like both the Ling and Yang families were at loggerheads with each other, their lives were actually intertwined. If the Yangs were to destroy the Ling family, then that would also be the end of the road for the Yangs. Only because both families had misgivings over each other and were curbing the other, could the present scene in sky-bearing empire remain. If one family ceased to exist, the uncontrollable rise of the other surviving family would definitely catch the attention of the royal family, which would eliminate them to prevent this force from rising up any further. Thus, from another angle, to extinguish the Lings was to destroy his own family bloodline. The thought of this led to Yang Kongkun's current mood. However, Ling Shui had her own reasons for thinking so. Her own son, the current crown prince of this dynasty, was already 3 years old, and she had to start planning for her son's future. The power held by the Ling family was too immense, whether it was in the government or military, they were both equally and unreasonably powerful. In the past, the Ling family had no descendants, and thus even if they had the ambition, this would only lead to their own downfall due to the lack of heirs. However, times have changed. With the addition of this little thing, this could be said to be the tipping point. The Ling family was simply too large and too powerful, to the point that even the royal family was unable to rest easy any longer. If they were to have any ambitions, then the Empress's son would definitely not be safe. Yang Shui was naturally unwilling to see such a scene. Thus she put in the effort to set up countermeasures, planning to let both her family and the Ling family drag each other down. Once her son steps up to become the emperor, he would still be able to provide some form of leeway for her family. As long as her son managed to sit on the throne, even if the Yangs were to be on the decline, they would have the chance to rise again from the ashes. However, if she were to let the Ling family snatch the advantage, then this would not just be a problem for the Yang family, but even the royal family would become like scattered ashes and dispersed smoke. Before she entered a marriage, she was just a pure and innocent girl from the Yang family. However, she was now first a mother and thus had to look out for her son. Secondly, she was the empress of this current dynasty and would of course have to protect the foundation of the royal family. Lastly, she was considered a female of the Yang family. Thus, although she felt guilty towards her father, she did not think that she had done anything wrong. Yang Kongkun let out a long sigh, seemingly aging a few years in a short time. Only after a long while did he finally speak, "The Lings shouldn't be finding you for trouble but will definitely pay closer attention to you. I will not stop you from doing your thing, but at least within the next few years, you are not allowed to carry out any plans." He sighed before he continued in a tone of melancholy, "Take care of yourself, only then will you be able to defeat the enemy. Okay, we're almost at the palace. I'll head back first." As he finished, he did not wait for Yang Shui to reply and left the palanquin directly. Yang Shui stared at her father's silhouette as the rims of her eyes reddened. However, she did not say anything in the end. After getting down, Yang Kongkun stood for a while, as though awaiting some form of reply from her. However, sensing that Yang Shui was not going to talk, he gave another deep sigh before putting his hands behind his back and walking away. 2 steps later, he suddenly stopped and slowly spoke, "He is but an infant. Even if he is a genius, you still have time before he becomes an adult. Why not take a few years to observe? For all you know, he might not even be worth your attention. Don't give in to groundless fears. At most, if the worst comes the worst, it is still not too late to carry it out." Hearing this, Yang Shui's eyes suddenly gleamed. As he finished speaking, Yang Kongkun strode away briskly, never turning his head back once. His daughter was, after all, not merely his daughter anymore. At the same time, she was the mother of the current crown prince, and the emperor's wife. Being her father, he had already made her life difficult for her past 18 years. There was no need to continue making her life difficult. This matter would be left for her to do as she deemed fit. Watching her father's shadow slowly disappear, she noticed that it was more slouched than before, which left her in a daze and unable to speak. Her eyes started to brim with unshed tears. It was a good while after that before she finally regained the clear and cold look in her pupils, with her gaze slowly turning back to a frosty look. Lazily stretching out on the seat, she coldly ordered, "Proceed on to the palace." Chapter 12. Catching the Fragrance Bag. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 12. Catching the Fragrance Bag. Translator David T. Editor. Cell in front of Ling Tian was a long table with a myriad of items placed on it. On half of the table, there were sabers, spears, bows and more. They were more than enough to show the expectations the Ling family had of Ling Tian. To be a great general like his father. As Ling Tian took a glance over all of those things, he understood plenty of things. Become a general in future. Ling Tian had honestly not thought about that before. Since the heavens are giving me another chance, how could I be satisfied at just being a general of a small nation? On the other half of the table, the things there seemed extremely insignificant. There were the essential items for scholars like a calligraphy brush, ink and more. Furthermore, there was even a small stamp on the table. Ling Tian could not help but laugh bitterly. There just isn't anything for me to put up a show. His small body stood atop the large table as he glanced at all of the items. But he did not stop at any of the items as he glanced through them all. Everyone stared at this small little child with interest as their eyes widened in shock when they saw that he was not interested in any of the items present. Just what does he want? Everyone present had witnessed this one-year-old catch many times already. No matter what, the child would definitely choose something for sure. Even if they did not like it, other children will still pick up some of the items and play with it like a toy before putting it down for sure. However, they had never witnessed a ceremony where the child was uninterested in anything. Everyone could not help but think to themselves, he is indeed befitting of being the successor of the Ling family. He is so composed and steady even at such a young age. Consort Ling Ran let go of the emperor's arm and with a fragrant wind, she went to the side of Chu Ting'er who was by the side of the table. With an amused smile, she looked at her nephew and asked, "Tian'er, are you not going to choose anything?" Chu Ting'er stared at her son nervously as she thought to herself, "Little brat, choose something at least." She was nervous to the point where she almost wanted to choose something on her son's behalf. Just at this moment, Ling Tian's eyes lit up as he looked towards Ling Ran's waist. On her waist, there was a fragrance bag which was hanging there. Ling Tian's eyes then gleamed with joy as he ran towards his aunt. Ling Ran was completely elated, "Little Tian, you are indeed close to your dear aunt, ha ha ha." Ah! Before she even finished laughing, her joy had already turned into shock. She stood there at a loss, looking at Ling Tian who had already grabbed onto the fragrance bag which was on her waist. His fair soft hands grabbed tightly onto the fragrance bag and he refused to let go. At the same time, he cried out in a barely audible voice, "I want this." Ling Zhan's face immediately darkened. He glared fiercely at Ling Ran and almost wanted to throw this daughter of his, who was a consort, out with a single fist. Ling Zhan had seen many young masters from the different noble families grabbing fragrance bags or other things similar to it during the one-year-old catch ceremony. All of them who grabbed fragrance bags were all mercilessly mocked by his grandfather. A classic playboy in the making. Today, he was also afraid that this little brat here would also end up choosing something like this. Thus, he commanded all of these things to be thrown out for the ceremony today, lest he ends up becoming a laughingstock. Furthermore, he instructed that all the fragrance bags on the ladies must be removed for today. Duke Ling was extremely meticulous in his planning and did not allow anything to go wrong. But no matter how meticulous he was, the only one he forgot was this daughter of his who was in the imperial palace. Today, it could be said that the fragrance bag on Ling Ran was the only one that could be found in the Ling family mansion. Things were just so coincidental. As all of the officials who were present saw that, they were all dumbfounded and tried their best to control their laughter. Even the emperor, Long Xiang, who was extremely dissatisfied with the empress, also couldn't help but break out into laughter. Watching the colorful emotions on Ling Zhan's face, everyone found it increasingly difficult to hold back their laughter. Perhaps, this was just like how a smart man would end up falling to his own ingenuity. Ever since all of the officials entered the Ling family mansion, they had realized that there weren't any fragrance bags on the ladies in the mansion. If there were only one or two who did not have fragrance bags on them, it might be a coincidence. But if all of them did not have any fragrance bags on, it was enough to show that something was wrong. Although everyone present was silently cursing this cunning old man for cheating as such, who would dare to say it out in the open? If the Ling family placed the fragrance bag on the table openly and Ling Tian grabbed it, everyone would only tease him for a moment and forget about it. However, now that there wasn't a single fragrance bag present in this gigantic Ling family mansion with a population of over 1,000, Ling Tian still unexpectedly ended up grabbing it. Furthermore, it was the fragrance bag that the consort herself was wearing. Seeing how Ling Tian's little face turned red from grabbing onto the fragrance bag so tightly, everyone could not help but laugh out even louder. Chu Tinger's face turned red as she took a step forward, wanting to snatch the fragrance bag from Ling Tian. But she never expected Ling Tian to hold on to it so tightly that she wasn't able to snatch it over. Seeing how his wife and son was fighting over a fragrance bag, Ling Xiao could not help but laugh despite his anger. Forget it, if it wants it, then let him hold on to it. As he said that, he took a deep breath, feeling extremely ashamed. Although the 1-year-old catch ceremony was not enough to determine one's future, there were many people who believed in it. They all broke out into a hearty laughter with an extremely bright smile on their faces, particularly those officials who had been teased by Ling Zhan and his son. Ling Zhan took a deep sigh of exasperation as he pointed at Ling Ran with his trembling hands. After he trembled for a moment, he did not say anything and walked out of the room. It seemed that this was no small blow to this old man and he would probably not attend the banquet being held later. Ling Xiao could not help but lament bitterly in his heart, if my father is not going to appear, then don't tell me I will have to bear all of these on my own. His face darkened at that thought. The emperor, Long Xiang, coughed once he managed to rein in his laughter with much difficulty and asked seriously, "It is getting late already and we are getting a little hungry." As he said that, he was hinting that the banquet of the Ling family cannot be avoided. All of the officials then celebrated excitedly. As Ling Ran saw the situation unfold, she knew that she had just gotten herself into a lot of trouble. Thinking about how black her father's face was when he left, her heart began to beat rapidly. Originally, she wanted to escape from her father and run back into the palace. However, Ling Tian clung onto her body like he was a koala bear and grabbed on tightly to her fragrance bag without letting go. Not able to make him let go of her anytime soon, she could only helplessly hug Ling Tian in her arms. With a bitter laughter, she complained in her heart. Little fellow, you have gotten your aunt into deep trouble." On the banquet, Ling Ran sat beside the emperor, Long Xiang. Although she had a high status at the head of the table, she could not sit down properly as though there were pins and needles beneath her. She hated the fact that she could not turn into a gust of wind and disappear from the banquet. All of the officials present felt that they did not make a wasted trip at all. Not only were they able to witness the war of words between the two heads of the Ling and Yang family, but also watch the exciting act by the empress. Finally, they were finally able to see Ling Zhan suffer from his own medicine after laughing at all the children who grabbed the fragrance bags. In the end, his own grandson grabbed the fragrance bag, the one and only fragrance bag. With an excited mood, the officials had faces full of smiles. Their conversations were full of joy as their appetite and alcohol tolerance were particularly good. In the hall, all the officials exchanged toasts with each other as some of them began to drink heartily despite the fact that they were in the presence of the emperor and consort. As for Ling Tian, who was the mastermind of all these, he was already caught back into the room to be taught a lesson by his mother, Chu Tinger. After a few glasses of wine, Ling Ran's mood gradually became composed and she managed to force herself to eat something. Seeing that the emperor, Long Xiang, was about to be done with his meal, she began to whine and pester him to return back to the palace. Long Xiang had always doted on this consort of his a lot and naturally knew what she was worried about. Thus, he agreed without delay. Before announcing that he was leaving, there was a young servant maid who exited from the bedroom. She then knelt on the ground and said, "Old madam said she has not seen consort for a long time already and misses her greatly. She hopes that the emperor will permit the consort to stay in the mansion for a few days." Ling Ran was startled as her face became dull, with tears almost streaming down. Long Xiang also laughed bitterly, looking at her helplessly. "Since old madam has such a request, Xiao Ran, stay here for a few days then. We will send someone to fetch you back to the palace a few days later." He then instructed Ling Xiao, who was already red from the alcohol, "Ling Xiao, I will allow the consort to stay in the mansion. We will be returning back to the palace first. Uncle Ling's mood isn't too good. Please help me to say goodbye to him." Following which, he laughed and walked out. Looking at the emperor leave, Ling Ran's mood was completely ruined. She had no choice but to follow the servant maid, walking in like a zombie. Not too long later, a thunderous roar sounded. Everyone in the hall then looked at each other, bursting out into an amused laughter. Chapter 13. Feigning Weak. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 13. Feigning Weak. Translator David T. Editor. Cell BDNV Backyard. After the prank, Ling Tian also received his punishment. His Snow White butt had an imprint of a large palm, obviously the doing of his father. After the ceremony, Ling Zhan found an opportunity to teach Ling Xiao a lesson. Like an erupting volcano, he scolded Ling Xiao viciously. When Ling Xiao escaped pitifully, he was still not spared from 2 rods from his enraged father. With a stomach full of grievances, Ling Xiao was naturally extremely indignant. The moment he went back to his room and saw Ling Tian, he slapped Ling Tian's butt without a second word. Following which, he was thrown out of the room by Chu Tinger, who was angered like a lioness. Then, Chu Tinger began to apply medicine to Ling Tian's butt with a face full of worry and heartache. As she applied the medicine, she began to shed tears of heartache. Ling Tian felt extremely weird. With a modern spirit of 25 years old, he had a mother who was younger than him. Now his whole body was completely naked as his mother was rubbing his smooth butt while consoling him. Ling Tian originally thought that he would be extremely embarrassed by it. He even thought that he may have some dirty thoughts in his mind if such a thing were to occur. However, when he really encountered it, Ling Tian was surprised to find that his heart was completely pure. There was only the deep feeling of him being touched. As his mother's hands began to touch him, he felt that his body was extremely comfortable all over. From that gentle hands and eyes filled with love, Ling Tian felt a deep sense of belonging. His nose could not help but turn sour as tears rolled down his face. In the past, he had deeply wished for the care of a mother, the loving consolation of a mother. However, his mother from the previous world only left him a pile of soil and a few photographs which turned yellow. In his past life, he was only able to reminisce the smile of his mother in his dreams at night. Now, all of these were extremely real as they existed beside him in reality. Ling Tian was satisfied. Aya, this stubborn bull. How could he bear to deal such a heavy hand to his own son? I must definitely teach him a good lesson later. He is too much. He is going to anger this old lady to death. Tinger, don't be too sad, even Tianer isn't crying. What a good child. Old Madam Ling walked into the room slowly. As she saw the handprint on her grandson's butt, she was enraged and almost shed tears of heartbreak. Chu Tinger wiped away her tears and swallowed hard. This also can't be blamed on my husband. It can only be blamed on the fact that this child is just too disappointing. Of all the things he could have chosen, he just had to choose his aunt's fragrance bag, making his grandfather so angry for no reason. It is only right for him to be beaten. Old Madame Ling's eyes narrowed as she scolded angrily, "Don't mention that old folly. He only knows how to be concerned with face. So what if our grandson likes the fragrance bag? Who wouldn't like something so nice smelling? Besides, even if our grandson likes women in future, don't tell me we wouldn't be able to find them for him. Don't tell me we won't be able to afford them. That father and son pair are just making a mountain out of a molehill. Let this old lady give your husband a good scolding." I rushed over so quickly because I was afraid that he would beat my grandson. But I still came too late and did not make it in time. Humph. Just see how I teach him a lesson later. Aya, my poor grandson, look at his smooth skin. Just how could he bear to deal such a heavy hand? Come, let grandmother give you a hug, ha ha ha, you're too obedient. Ling Tian was extremely glad. This grandmother of mine is just too amazing. It seems like in the eyes of this old lady, everything I do is definitely right. Everything I do would definitely be supported by her. Ha ha ha, I like. After living in this household for a year, Ling Tian somewhat understood how the Ling family rose to prominence. After he understood that, Ling Tian deeply understood how wise this saying was. Chaotic times will definitely produce heroes. Circumstances would definitely mold heroes. The head of the Ling family, Ling Zhan, was a hero who was born from such chaotic times. The Ling family was originally only a middle-tier family. At that time, Ling Zhan, who was still the young master, had met Long Qingtian in a chance encounter. The both of them hit off really well with each other and became sworn brothers. From then on, the Ling family had become the spearhead for Long Qingtian. As the many blood battles were fought, almost all the elites of the Ling family were wiped out. Ling Zhan also rose into prominence after that great war. He became the greatest contributor to the founding of the sky-bearing emperor after stepping over countless of bodies. Rising together with him, the Ling family also became ranked alongside the 5 greatest families as the 6th greatest family. According to what Ling Tian understood from this 1 year, Ling Zhan was definitely not someone who was extremely scheming with a deeply hidden agenda. The only reason he was able to walk this far was because of the chance encounter which he had. Fortunately, he did not die. Just when the sky-bearing empire needed a general with heroism and prestige, Ling Tian took up that responsibility as the commander-in-chief of the nation's army. He then led the troops to war, spreading the territory of the sky-bearing empire and making many accomplishments. His only son had also inherited his legacy and was even more accomplished than his father. But there were also disadvantages about that. He had also inherited that straightforward attitude of Ling Zhan. Although the Ling family had great authority and power now, the Ling family did not have deep roots after all. There were few talents within the Ling family and they just could not be compared to the other great families which had prospered for over hundreds of years. Through the hundreds of years of accumulation, their resources were as high as the mountains. As he understood all of these, the first thing that Ling Tian did was to take in a deep cold breath. Goodness, an idiotic family like this is actually able to win itself a standing in such a competitive empire. They were still able to expand to such an extent without falling. This was nothing short of a miracle in Ling Tian's heart. The people in this world are just far too kind. They were actually able to hold themselves back from this piece of juicy fat meat. There is actually something as good as this in the world. This is a complete joke. Ling Tian did not believe it at all. There could only be a single reason the Ling family was able to enjoy its power without falling. Someone was keeping them from falling. Furthermore, it was definitely not a single power, there were definitely more than one power supporting the Ling family in the dark. All of these powers who were supporting the Ling family definitely did not have any kind intentions, just like the Yang family which was together with the Ling family in the sky-bearing empire. From a certain perspective, it was just like the Ling family having a large tree to rely on, sharing their glory. Although the two families were opposing each other, Ling Tian believed that this enmity was definitely created by the Yang family. Following which, their enmity will be slowly deepened until the point where both parties are unable to live with each other peacefully. In other words, the Ling family was the existence which the late emperor, Long Qingtian, and the late Yang family had supported to fight the Yang family. The Yang family had no choice but to take a step back. The Ling family closed in on the Yang family for the same reason. The reason the emperor would support the Ling family was definitely to strike at the Yang family, preventing them from dominating the sky-bearing empire. Now, this motive of his was almost perfectly achieved. Ling Tian had every reason to believe that the reason for the rise of his family was definitely not as simple as it seemed. There were definitely the shadows of the other great families. The other great families would definitely not want to see the Yang family or the Ling family dominate the whole sky-bearing empire on their own, becoming a hidden threat to their family. Thus, it was only natural for them to support the Ling family to strike at the Yang family. Ling Tian was able to deduce that his own family was nothing more than an anomaly, the product of the complicated situation on the continent. Ling Tian could even feel that there will definitely be many spies from the imperial palace and the Yang family in this Ling family mansion of his. As Ling Tian thought about this, he could immediately sense danger coming his way. The first thing Ling Tian decided was that he must definitely keep a low profile before he was able to protect himself and his family, trying his best to avoid the attention of the other families. If he were to let them find out that the successor to the Ling family was a heaven-defying genius, the good luck his family had would definitely reach its end. After constant planning, Ling Tian had finally taken the first step to feigning his weakness. The one-year-old catch ceremony today. Ling Tian understood that the moment he caught the fragrance bag, he would definitely become the greatest laughingstock across the continent for the next few years. At the same time, as they laugh at him, they would definitely let their guard down. The catch of this infant would be able to exchange at least 3 to 5 years worth of time for his family. Even if he were to become a laughingstock, it was worth it. As long as he was able to continue feigning weak, he would definitely be able to slowly form an organization that solely belongs to him with his experience from his past life. After the different powers take notice of him, they would be shocked to realize that they had already missed the best opportunity to deal with him. This daddy here is considered a genius even in the 21st century. If I am going to deal with all you barbarians whose brains have not been fully developed, then there is really no justice in the world, Ling Tian thought to himself. Of course, Ling Tian felt that the matters today were not completely perfect. The reason for that was the young man who revealed a killing intent towards him when he was just born. Ever since Ling Tian saw him when he had just been born, Ling Tian had never seen him again. Ling Tian had never forgotten about him before because he was just like a lurking venomous snake in his own family. He was extremely dangerous and Ling Tian did not know just how many of such venomous snakes there were in his family. Just where did this venomous snake go in this past year? Just what has he been doing? Will he harm the family? Chapter 14. Small accomplishment. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 14. Small accomplishment. Translator David T. Editor. The days passed one by one as Ling Tian constantly worried as he hypothesized. The years also drifted by. In a blink of an eye, Ling Tian was already 5 years old. The winter wind was biting cold, and large snowflakes fluttered about, blanketing the heavens and earth in a silvery white color. Winter was fast approaching. Deep into the night when all was quiet, the snowflakes still floated down, unhurriedly and unceasingly. In the secret chamber, the temperature was, however, warm like spring. Ling Tian was alone inside, his small body completely naked as he sat with both knees crossed, his hands forming lotus seals. His face was warped with agony as his body dripped with sweat all over. This was the critical juncture. Ling Tian knew that if he wanted to survive in this world where the rules were more complicated than his previous world, the only option he had was to quickly raise his own strength, so he could deal with any unexpected twists along the way. Within these 5 years, because of the experiences Ling Tian had in his past life, he familiarized himself to the point that he had cultivated to the peak of the 3rd stage for his divine dragon shocking formula. Now that he was approaching the 4th stage, he isolated himself behind closed doors, so as to rush forth and break the shackles to the 4th level. In his previous life, he had practiced the divine shocking dragon formula to the upper tier of the 5th stage by the age of 15, which made him a miracle beyond miracles in the Ling family. Ever since this formula existed, in the past millennium, no one had ever heard of someone reaching the 5th stage when they were merely 15 years of age. This was also the main reason Ling Tian was the target of much jealousy in his previous life. In this life, Ling Tian had used Xiantian Qi, which was considered the pinnacle of martial arts as his foundations, and thus his improvements as compared to his past life were miles apart. Of course, due to the difference between Xiantian and Houtian Qi, the strength he could unleash currently was definitely even larger. From his own estimates, if he could successfully overcome the barrier leading to the 4th stage of this divine formula, just relying on the aid given by Xiantian Qi, he would already be comparable to his previous self when he was at the peak of the 6th stage. Such a result was unbelievable even for Ling Tian himself. Now, he had reached the most important part. Ling Tian had already felt the signs of a breakthrough occurring. Through his spiritual sense, he could see the true qi inside himself boiling as though it just came from a pot which someone had opened. They revolved unceasingly through every single meridian in his body, and for every revolution they made, Ling Tian would intentionally add on a bit more strength to it, to further catalyze the speed of the revolution. This sort of method was actually the brainchild of Ling Tian, and its purpose was to ensure that the revolution would continue to retain its original strength and not fade as it passed by each of his acupuncture points. Even though this method's efficiency was extremely high, practicing such a move would result in unbearable pain to the user. It could be compared to trying to force 100-fold amount of water through a small rivulet of water, where the sides of the water channel would definitely not be able to take such a pressure and might even result in an irreparable scene of destruction. Ling Tian's meridians could be compared to those channels, struggling to endure the tyrannical pressure of the Xiantian Qi. If he were to lose control, he would end up destroying his meridians and crippling himself. Ling Tian gingerly circulated the Xiantian Qi inside his body, holding his breath as he calmly waited. The amount of qi within him grew larger and larger, and the speed became faster and faster. It grew to the point that it started to indistinctly form the shape of a tornado within his dantian. Ling Tian could even sense the high speed of true qi being circulated as it produced a xiu sound through his spiritual sense. Ling Tian's body turned completely red, with a few areas beginning to exude beads of blood. Veins started bulging out from his forehead, as though earthworms were occupying that area. Finally, the inner circulation of his true qi reached maximum velocity, and many more areas under Ling Tian's skin started to gradually tear, in which dark red blood could be seen. There was not a single spot on his body that was not resisting pain, and the torment from the depths of his soul all the way to his physical body was the very limit of what he could bear. At this point, Ling Tian understood that if he were to continue forcing and consolidating his qi and strength, his body would probably explode from being unable to withstand the pressure. He could only forcefully stabilize his state of mind and manipulate the powerful qi current to smash on his Guanyuan acupuncture point before it spiraled out of control. By breaking through his blocked Guanyuan acupuncture point, this symbolized that his arterial and meridian pathways no longer had any blockage. This was the point when one could be considered a high-level martial arts practitioner. His body was racked with pain akin to being torn apart, and under the influence of the true qi, his hair band snapped apart with a bang sound. However, the stalk of black hair on his head did not fall, but rather shot straight upwards towards the sky, as though he had really become a real super saiyan. Hong! A tremendous sound went off within Ling Tian's sea of consciousness, as his Guan Yuan acupuncture point suddenly burst open, with the immensely strong true qi rushing through and only settling down after 9 further cycles of circulation within his body. There was a patch of water stained on the floor. It originated from Ling Tian as he perspired while enduring the pain to the point that formed a distinct circle around where he sat. Only at that exact moment where the true qi burst past the Guan Yuan acupuncture point, did Ling Tian finally relax his entire body as an incomparable comfort began to permeate his self. He felt that his whole body was wonderfully comfortable and warm, as though it was made up of cotton. Caught up in this feeling, he felt as though he could really soar up into the sky from where he was seated and twirl around in the sky. At this point, he envisioned himself transforming into an immortal. Comparing that moment of bliss, Ling Tian felt as though all the hard work and pain was totally worth it. This sort of feeling made Ling Tian reminisce about his past self. It was just like an opium addict of decades whom, after stopping for a month, lighted up a stick for a smoke. This sort of feeling was, as though he had lost all strength and even his spirit felt weightless, beginning to float upwards and away. Laughing mockingly at himself, Ling Tian began to recollect all these weird thoughts within his mind and continued to activate his divine formula. With every passing cycle of activation, the blood spots on his skin lessened by a portion to the point where after countless days, his skin actually recovered to its original crystalline and jade-like appearance before he broke through his blockage. Letting out a drawn-out breath, Ling Tian slowly opened his eyes, in which a trace of radiant light flashed momentarily. Checking his body in a very satisfied manner, Ling Tian then stood up, putting on the robe that was placed by his side. Although he had no idea how long he had spent sitting in this secret chamber, he was sure that it did not exceed 4 hours. However, if he did not exit the chamber soon, he was sure that his mother would start to worry. Even though he took the opportunity of going out only in the dead of the night to practice his martial arts, he did not know whether his mother would be afraid of him catching a cold and hence come over to his room in the middle of the night to cover him up. This secret chamber was built within Ling Tian's bedroom, for the convenience and secrecy of his training. At the age of 3, he started to secretly hollow out an underground space below his small room for his practice purposes. The size of the room was only about 3 to 4 meters squared, and for him who had been cultivating since he was in his mother's womb, this was merely a piece of cake. It only took him a couple of nights to finish excavating the soil and rocks, moving them to the garden with no one noticing. Gently knocking up the limestone tile above him, Ling Tian's tiny body slipped out like a wisp of smoke and securely caught the tile just as it was about to crash onto the floor, placing it back gently with nary a sound. Ling Tian smiled in satisfaction as he strolled to the window, staring entranced at the silver-white world beyond the window. Soft snowflakes slowly spun down, giving a dreamlike illusion. Ling Tian suddenly felt a mysterious surge of loneliness emanating from within his heart. Ever since he had crossed over to this world, this sort of feelings was commonplace. It was as though in the boundless heavens and earth, he was the only one who was alive. In the dead of the night when there was no human noise, this sort of loneliness would act up vigorously. To be physically in this world, yet spiritually not belonging here. To have a body of a 5-year-old, yet to have the mental capacity of a 30-year-old adult. This sort of discrepancies often caused Ling Tian to not know if he should laugh or cry and also gave him grief beyond measure. He did not have a lack of human company around him and his current family was extremely harmonious. With his grandparents showing care and concern from deep within their hearts and his parents constantly pampering and showering him with love, to any common person, the Ling Tian now was at a place too high for them to reach, having owned almost everything that was needed. However, no one understood what Ling Tian was really thinking deep inside. No one could understand the deep-seated chill in the depths of his heart, as well as his desolate feeling of loneliness. Even though he was the core of thousands of people, Ling Tian's heart forever remained solitary. Of course Ling Tian understood that since he had already arrived in this world, wanting to go back to his original world was simply a fool's delusion. The only thing he could do was to accept the truth and continue living on as best as he could. While he was trying his best to do so, this did not mean that his heart felt relief. Because he was constantly repressing his emotions, Ling Tian occasionally felt that he could not bear with this sort of pain, and this sort of repression could not be understood even by his closest kin. Ling Tian would undoubtedly continue repressing his emotions till the end of his life, because this secret was only privy to himself. Crossing worlds through his spirit. Carrying the complete memories with him as he crossed over. This sort of feeling was not admirable at all. Just purely the part of loneliness would be enough to drive someone insane. In the past when Ling Tian was bored, he would often log onto the web to read stories about the characters crossing to a different world and would be totally engrossed with them. However, Ling Tian now understood. It turned out that crossing over was actually such a painful matter. Ling Tian deeply inhaled, his eyes flashing with all kinds of emotions. Nostalgia, hatred, joy, pining, bliss and loneliness. There were hundreds of varieties of different emotions. If someone were to have witnessed this scene, they would have seen that the expression in his eyes literally held a whole life story within it. Of course, those who witnessed it would definitely treat this 5-year-old child as a demon or monster. Closing his eyes, Ling Tian forced back the tears that were about to spill out. No matter the case, in this current environment, there was little time to be spent on such sentimental thoughts. The hymn now had too many things to complete. A learned scholar who weeps with the passing of seasons in this disorderly world would only be sentenced to an early death. Suddenly, Ling Tian's heart palpitated as he sensed something. Outside his door, a pair of soft footsteps sounded, followed by the low voice of the female attendant on duty outside his room speaking in an extremely respectful tone. This was followed by a gentle voice lightly questioning the attendant. Ling Tian could only smile bitterly. It seemed like his mother Chu Tinger had come to check on him. Chapter 15. So it was him you are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 15. So it was him BL.net translator. David T. Editor. Cell. The next moment, Ling Tian had left the window and arrived by the side of his bed. His bathrobe had also been taken off and was hanging on the headboard of the bed. 2 layers of blanket were wrapped around Ling Tian's body tightly. Ling Tian's eyes gradually shut as his breathing became stable with a peaceful look on his face. Occasionally, his mouth twitched and he was obviously in a comfortable, deep sleep already. Suddenly, there was a creak and the door opened slightly. A delicate figure walked in as Ling Tian revealed a look of happiness with his eyes still shut. When this person had walked into the room, a warm feeling rose from his heart. This person was his mother, Chu Tinger. A thick velvet coat was draped over Chu Tinger's body and she revealed a prideful and satisfied smile of a mother. After she entered, she first closed the door gently, afraid that the chilly winds would enter and make her son catch a cold. She then walked towards the side of the bed softly and looked at the sweet face of her son sleeping soundly with a blessed smile. She stretched out her right hand and wanted to gently touch her son's cheek. But she suddenly thought of something and was afraid that her hand was too cold and quickly retracted her hand. Then, she stretched both her hands into the velvet coat and placed them by her own skin. Only after a while when she felt that her hands were warm enough did she take her hands out and gently touch her son's face with a smile of satisfaction and blessing. She sat down gently by her son's side and looked at her son's face silently with loving eyes. After she thought about something, she smiled gently and bent forward, kissing her son on the forehead. Then, she placed Ling Tian's right hand which was out of the blanket back into the blanket and arranged the blanket again. Only then did she stand up with reluctance and walk out softly. After the barely inaudible sound of a door closing, Chu Tinger disappeared from the room as a unique smell which belonged only to Chu Tinger lingered in the room. On the bed, Ling Tian opened his eyes glistening with tears silently. Ling Tian could clearly feel every single action Chu Tinger had after she entered the room with his spiritual sense. When he saw how his mother was afraid of her hands being too cold and warming it up immediately, Ling Tian was extremely touched. At that moment, the word mother, which was so sacred to Ling Tian, completely merged together with Chu Tinger's appearance. In Ling Tian's mind, there was a subtle change as he began to feel a deep sense of belonging. It was as though he felt that he would not be lonely as long as his mother was beside him. He began to laugh. Early morning, and the snow had not stopped. Ling Tian wrapped himself tightly in the blanket, making him seem extremely fat. On his head was also a snow-white cap with two rabbit dot-like ears on the top of his head and 2 pieces of red jade on his forehead. Ling Tian was speechless. A 30-year-old man like him was wearing such a classic child's hat. This really made him feel like puking. However, in the eyes of others, it was a cute face hidden in a cute rabbit's hat, making the handsome Ling Tian look extremely cute. With Ling Tian's martial arts cultivation, he was basically capable of preventing the cold and heat from affecting him. Such temperatures were essentially negligible to him. Even if he wore a thin robe, he would still be able to defend against the cold. But he still had to put on a show for his grandparents and parents, lest they nag at him all day. The moment the few old people saw Ling Tian wearing something a little thinner, they made a big fuss out of it. They even punished the maids who were in charge of taking care of Ling Tian. From that day on, Ling Tian had become obedient. Although Ling Tian felt extremely blessed because of all the care and concern his family showered him with, he had a huge headache when it came to their constant nagging. Ling Tian was already pretty tall, around the height of a 7 to 8-year-old child. His eyebrows were like swords, cutting down diagonally. Below them were a pair of deep black eyes and a sharp nose. His skin was extremely fair and looked even prettier than that of a little girl. After the servant maids cleaned Ling Tian's face, Ling Tian walked towards the study of his parents. After a few steps, the sound of a gust sounded from behind him. As Ling Tian turned to take a look, a large snowball was flying towards his face. A few bits of snow landed on his clothes, immediately turning it cold. Ling Tian was puzzled. Who would dare to touch me, the treasure of the Ling family, in the Ling family mansion? He could not help but stop and turn around to take a look. The servant maids beside him were startled to the point their faces turned pale as they hurriedly guarded in front of Ling Tian and shouted, "Who? Come out!" Following which, a giggle sounded as a little boy 7 to 8 years of age walked out from the bamboo forest by the side with a mischievous smile. Ling Tian then focused his hearing and heard a flurry of footsteps moving away from the bamboo forest. Ling Tian could not help but give a mysterious smile. The servant maids then heaved a sigh of relief and said with annoyance, "So it is young Master Zhen. Young Master Zhen is really mischievous, but this is the little young master. You must not do this again in the future. If the little young master were to be startled, this maid will not be able to bear the consequences." Ling Tian then laughed and said, "It's all right, who is this little brother?" At the same time, doubt rose from his heart, "Young Master Zhen. Who is he? This is the first time I have seen someone who dares to be so rude to me after 5 years. Ling Tian then studied him carefully. Despite the mischievous smile on his face, his lips were thin with a skinny face. While his face was full of smiles, his gaze was chilly. The way he looked at Ling Tian was just like a venomous snake looking at its prey. The gaze seemed to even contain a deep hatred. Ling Tian was shocked. Why would a child so young have such a deep hatred towards him? The servant maid who was leading the way then said respectfully, "This is little young Master Ling Zhen, son of young Master Ling Kong." Ling Kong? Who is Ling Kong? Ling Tian continued asking with doubt. "Sister Qiuyu, so this is young Master Tian. I didn't know that young Master Tian was so suave." That brat walked forward with a smile, "My father is Ling Kong, and you must be younger brother Tian, right? You're really cute." Ling Tian then snickered in his heart, little brat, do you think you will be able to fight against me? Ling Tian then pulled Ling Zhen's hands excitedly and said, you are. I can have someone to play with me already. Where do you stay at? Ling Tian then thought to himself. The chance occurrence which you guys set up today is probably to send this brat next to me, right? Then let me just follow what you guys have planned. Both the brats then began to talk to each other with the various intentions in their heart. As though Ling Tian could not bear with the cold, he trembled and said with a pale face, how cold. A look of disdain quickly flashed past Ling Zhen's eyes, before Ling Zhen asked with concern, if little brother Tian is cold, you should quickly follow sister Qiu Yu to aunt's place. We can play again when you're free. Qiu Yu then said with a smile, young Master Zhen is so sensible. Young Master Tian, let us go quickly. Old Master and Madam should be anxious from waiting already. Ling Tian responded with a nod before saying with reluctance, all right then. Bye-bye, brother Zhen. I will find you later to play. He then turned to walk away, feeling a burning gaze down his back. Ling Tian's lips twitched and he smiled mysteriously. Ling Xiao and Chu Tinger sat beside each other while Ling Tian sat opposite, finishing his last mouthful of congee. After Ling Tian stood up, Chu Tinger pulled him into her bosom and took out a napkin, wiping his mouth gently while scolding him laughingly, this child, always not cleaning up his mouth after he finishes his meal. He is just like a little cat. Ling Tian leaned on his mother with a peaceful feeling rising from within him. Ling Zhao's face was full of smiles as he said, help Ling Tian to tidy up a little and we are going to find father. Father has been busy searching for a teacher for Ling Tian these past few days. He may have settled the matter already. Chu Tinger responded with an, oh, before asking with interest, teacher. I wonder which few scholars father has found. Ling Xiao replied, I also do not know. But, for them to have obtained father's approval, it definitely cannot go wrong. Pride then filled Chu Tinger's face as she said, no matter who the teacher is, our smart little Tianer will definitely be able to learn well, right? As she said that, she gently pinched Ling Tian's cheek. Ling Tian laughed bitterly in his heart. Then, he thought of something and asked, Mother, I saw a child called Ling Zhen on the way here. Who is he? Ling Zhen. Ling Xiao and Chu Tinger stared at each other for a moment. Then, Chu Tinger replied, he is the only son of your second uncle, Ling Kong. These few years, he followed your second uncle to the Northwest Horse Ranch. I believe your second uncle should be back already. The both of you are around the same age and can play together in future. Second uncle. Doesn't grandfather only have a single son? Ling Tian asked in doubt. You little brat. Your second uncle is an orphan who your grandfather adopted back then. When he grew up, your grandfather took him as a godson. After your mother gave birth to you, your second uncle was sent to the Northwest by your grandfather. Calculating the years, it has already been 5 years. Time really flies. Your second uncle is very capable and you must be respectful to him when you see him later. Okay. Ling Tian lowered his head as a face which he had never forgotten appeared in his mind. The person who revealed a killing intent to him when he was a child. He then laughed to himself. Ling Kong. You're finally back. This is getting more and more interesting. The matters today were probably arranged by you as well, right? Since you put in so much effort to bring your son up so well, this young master will also play with the both of you happily. Hee. Chapter 16. Unreasonable. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 16. Unreasonable. Translator David T. Editor. The family of 3 went to the main hall of the Ling family and Ling Tian was shocked the moment he entered. There were dozens of people in the hall. Young and old, tall and short. Ling Zhen was also in the crowd, leaning onto someone. The moment Ling Tian entered, he looked over and was certain that he was that person. The person who revealed a killing intent to him when he was born. Now, Ling Tian knew that he was called Ling Kong. After he knew that Ling Zhen was Ling Kong's son and Ling Kong was the only godson of his grandfather, Ling Tian understood the source of his killing intent. His father was the only successor of the Ling family but did not have a child after so many years of marriage. If this situation were to persist, then the only successor from the third generation would be Ling Kong's son, Ling Zhen. Ever since Ling Tian was born, he had completely destroyed the dreams of that father and son pair. Thus, they were naturally extremely hateful towards Ling Tian. As he thought about that, Ling Tian began to feel pity towards this father and son pair. He would also not be able to take such a blow if it happened to him. Wait a moment. Ling Tian suddenly thought about something. My father and mother are extremely loving and the both of them are extremely normal. Why would they not have a child after so many years of marriage? Don't tell me that is a conspiracy of Ling Kong all this while. A chilly gaze flashed past Ling Tian's eyes. If that is really the case, this Ling Kong deserves to die. Ever since Ling Tian entered the room, Ling Kong and Ling Zhen's eyes became agitated as a deep hatred hid beneath their eyes. Ling Tian twitched his lips, paid his greetings to his grandfather and ran forward. Ling Zhen immediately lit up as a bright smile filled his face, hugging Ling Tian in his bosom. Huh, I have not seen little young master for a few years and he has grown up to be so big already. He looks exactly like elder brother. Ha ha ha. A caring-sounding laughter sounded. Without looking back, Ling Tian knew that the laughter must have definitely came from Ling Kong. Ling Xiao and his wife paid their greetings to everyone present and sat down. Ling Zhan then became serious as he said to Ling Xiao and Chu Tinger, Tianer has grown up already and it is time for him to learn the 6 arts of a gentleman, 1, and poetry so he can have a future for himself. I can't possibly allow people to say that the grandson of Ling Zhan, is just a useless, incompetent and ignorant brat. Today, I have invited all of the famous scholars within the capital. If the both of you do not have any opinions, they will stay in the mansion from today to teach Tiana. As Ling Zhan said that, he looked towards Ling Xiao. Ling Xiao laughed bitterly, thinking. You have already arranged everything and chosen everyone. What disagreements can we have? He definitely has hidden intentions behind his words. What does he mean by useless, incompetent and ignorant brat? He is probably still angry at me because of the 1-year-old catch incident. Ling Xiao did not dare disagree and said, Father, you can just make the arrangements which you deem appropriate. Chu Tinger sat down with her brows furrowed. As she heard what Ling Zhan said, she could not help but be angry. This old man, how can you talk about your own grandson like that? My son is only 5, in what way is he incompetent? Ling Zhan then hugged Ling Tian and said with a smile, Good grandson, take a look, grandfather has specially searched for all these teachers for you. Ling Tian almost fainted as he pointed at the crowd asking in disbelief, all of these people are. Ling Zhan then said with a smile, Take a look, this is Mr. Qin who will teach you poetry. Mr. Qin is a righteous and knowledgeable man, and is a good teacher. Mr. Qin was dressed in a scholarly robe with a lean appearance and skinny figure. He then twiddled with his beard and nodded with a smile. This is Master Lu who will teach you archery and horse riding. Master Lu is extremely familiar with archery and horse riding. A few years ago, he was the instructor for the Imperial Guards. Many high-ranking officials in the military were taught by Master Lu. It can be said that he has many talented disciples. This is Master Shang who will teach you music. Master Shang has a profound understanding towards music, especially the zither, and is the #1 musician in the palace. This is Master He who will also teach you music. Master He is renowned for his skills with the side-blowing and end-blowing flute. All of the music fanatics in the world today would definitely be honored to listen to Master He's performance. This is Master Ho who will teach you drawing. Ling Tian's eyes grew wider. He will teach you calligraphy. Ling Tian rolled his eyes and almost fainted. He will teach you etiquette. Ling Tian. He will teach you. He will. Crash! Ling Tian's eyes turned white as he fainted on the ground, his whole body trembling. With the threat of refusing to eat, Ling Xiao and Chu Tinger began to plead for their son out of heartache. Together with the scolding of old Madame Ling, Ling Zhan finally changed his mind, retaining only a few teachers and sending the rest back. However, Ling Zhan only took a small step back. Ling Zhan seriously declared that even if Ling Tian wasn't going to learn them, he would have to understand them at the very least. Poetry, horse riding and archery were compulsory lessons for him. Chess, zither, calligraphy and painting were secondary lessons. As for the rest, he would also have to choose some of them. Ling Tian was depressed. This daddy here is able to be the all-rounded teacher of all these people. Not only in the areas of poetry, chess, music and calligraphy, but also in the 18 Chinese weapons together with both internal and external martial arts. For those who are even more interested, I can even teach them some chemistry or even English, Japanese, German, Spanish and Portuguese. With an extremely bad mood, Ling Zhen, who was someone whom he did not already like, became the target for him to vent his anger. After the ceremony of apprenticeship, Ling Kong suggested allowing Ling Zhen to study with Ling Tian to keep him company as well, obtaining the approval of Ling Zhan, Ling Xiao and his wife immediately. As for Ling Tian, he would naturally not have an issue against it. Who wouldn't like a toy for him to exploit his intelligence? As such, Ling Zhen became Ling Tian's study attendant under the insistence of Ling Kong. Originally, Ling Tian felt extremely amused when he saw the fictitious smile on Ling Zhen's face. But when he was in an extremely bad mood and Ling Zhen revealed a fake smile again, it got him a kick from Ling Tian. What are you laughing at? Get out of here if you continue laughing. What a joke. Perhaps it can be said that it is extremely rare for someone your age to be so scheming. Maybe it may be more interesting for me to play with you in a few years' time. But with your little intellect, you want to try hiding the sword with your smile. Aren't you just seeking death? Being caught off guard and having a foot to his face, Ling Zhen's nose began to bleed and he did not react in time. Only after a while did he begin to burst out into tears. Ling Tian then scolded fiercely, "What are you crying for? Didn't I just kick you once? You're crying so badly because of that. Che." He pointed a middle finger with disdain. Mr. Qin, who was reciting a poem while shaking his head, never expected that this little young master who looked as pretty as a girl would be so vicious. In a blink of an eye, another student was already lying on the floor with a face full of blood. At that moment, Mr. Qin's tongue was left hanging as he trembled from anger. He pointed at Ling Tian with his finger trembling, completely unable to say anything. You. Ling Tian then rolled his eyes and said, "What about me? This young master here is educating my study attendant. Do you have an opinion?" Mr. Qin's finger continued to tremble as he twitched in anger. You will anger this old man to death." Ling Tian snickered and kicked Ling Zhen in his abdomen. "Get up, are you pretending to be dead like a dog? This young master is telling you now. When I am not happy, you are not allowed to smile. When this young master is happy, you will have to laugh happily even if your leg is broken. Do you understand?" Ling Zhen cried out in pain as he wiggled to get up. With a vicious look on his face, he scolded, "Son of a B***tch. You dare to hit me? F***k. You have balls. You dare to scold me? Ha ha ha, I just want you to scold me. If you don't scold me, I won't be able to continue hitting you. But these words of yours have completely enraged me. This brat, both him and his grandfather does not hold our family in any regard." Ling Tian then rushed forward using both his arms and feet. Although Ling Zhen was older than him by 3 years, Ling Tian was extremely agile. If he were to use inner qi, he would probably be able to kill Ling Zhen with a single fist. The next instant, Ling Zhen lay on the floor like a dead fish, bruises all over his body. This child cannot be taught. Seeing how it was useless to stop the fight, Mr. Qin's face turned ashen as he lifted up the ruler in his hands and shouted, "Kneel down." For what? Kneel down for what? This young master has only taught my study attendant a lesson. Who asked him to smile when I'm in a bad mood? Don't tell me it is wrong for me to teach my subordinate a lesson. Now I have to be punished. Ling Tian said with force. What a joke. That pair of father and son wants to harm me even in their dreams. Of course there is nothing wrong for this young master to collect some interest first. Damn it, to let me study Confucius with him here is a complete joke. If I don't drive you away from anger, how will my plan succeed? Besides, if I were to really learn properly, won't that make the Yang family and imperial family deal with us prematurely? This daddy has already been obedient for 5 years, it is time for me to be hedonistic for once. 1. The 6 arts refer to rites, music, archery, charioteering, calligraphy and mathematics. Chapter 17. Quibbling. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 17. Quibbling. Translator David T. Editor. Mr. Qin then walked out with his sleeves fluttering. The direction he was going was obviously to lodge a complaint against Duke Ling. Ling Tian then sat on the chair which originally belonged to Mr. Qin and crossed his legs. He then placed his hands on his chin, thinking what he should do next. Ling Zhen lay on the floor, moaning in pain with blood all over his face, unable to get up. Ling Tian laughed in his heart. You want to lie down here so you can frame me? No worries. Ling Tian was extremely clear about how much strength he used. This brat would suffer from some superficial injuries at the very most and there would not be any serious injuries. The only reason he was still lying there was obviously to wait for Ling Zhan to come over so he could lodge a good complaint against Ling Tian. Hee, what a pity. Although that plan of yours isn't too bad, you will never imagine that I just need you to add fuel to the fire. If not, how would I be able to have an excuse to chase all of these teachers out? Don't tell me I will have to let them stay here to waste my precious time. However, it really does feel good to beat this brat up. Bold little scum. Ling Zhan came with a chilly wind with exasperation. The first thing he saw was the indifferent-looking Ling Tian seated on the teacher's chair with his legs crossed and Ling Zhen bleeding on the floor. In that instant, he exploded in anger. Without saying anything else, he picked Ling Tian up, turned his body around and pressed his small body against his knee. Pa pa pa. 3 loud slaps then sounded. These 3 slaps were not light at all. As Ling Tian did not circulate his inner qi to protect himself, his fair white butt immediately began to swell. Ling Zhan then hugged Ling Zhen from the floor and took a look at his injuries. Outside, a commotion sounded as Ling Xiao rushed in with an ashen face. Behind him, Chu Ting'er was jogging over breathlessly. A while later, old Madam Ling, Ling Kong, Sir Qin and the others all arrived. The moment they saw the scene, they were all dumbfounded. Zhener. As Ling Kong saw the state that his son was in, his face began to cramp up as he hugged his son in his bosom. Then, he hurriedly called for the maids to bring his son away to get his injuries tended to. After his son left, he looked towards Ling Tian with a violent look in his eyes, as though he wanted to swallow Ling Tian in a single gulp. No one expected that the first lesson from the teachers who stayed in the mansion would end up in a fight. Looking at the mess in the study, everyone had unbelievable expressions on their faces. Chu Ting'er cried out softly before quickly covering her mouth with her hands, with a flustered look in her eyes. That, you're going to anger this old man to death. Bastard! Kneel down. Ling Zhan shouted out with a thunderous voice, causing the snow collected on the bamboo leaves outside to fall from the tremors. Ling Tian pouted and slowly got up from the teacher's chair, kneeling down unwillingly. Father, Tian is still young and ignorant. This is the first time he has been restricted like this, he still has not gotten used to it yet. Please. Chu Ting'er quickly stepped forward to plead for her son. But before she finished her sentence, she was interrupted by Ling Zhan. Ever since the ancient times, a doting mother has always been the downfall of many children. Tian is only 5. He actually attacked his cousin during class. Furthermore, he was even rude to the teacher. Tian has already shown how mischievous and naughty he is today. If we were to let him off lightly, the lives of everyone in the Ling family will be ruined in his hands. You do not need to plead for him today. Ling Zhan did not want to give an explanation at all. However, he couldn't ignore the fact that his daughter in-law was pleading for his grandson. If his daughter-in-law couldn't see the gravity of this matter and continued to pamper her son, this grandson of his would definitely be ruined. Tears rolled down Chu Ting'er's face as she looked at her son who was kneeling on the floor. She stretched out her hands but did not dare to hug him. Ling Xiao then grunted, such a naughty child. How will he become someone great if he's not taught a lesson? It's all because you dote on him too much. As Ling Xiao said that, old Madame Ling retorted, as the saying goes, if a child is not taught properly, it is the fault of the father. Ling Xiao, as the father of Tian, you are responsible for at least half of the matter which happened today. How can you blame it on Ting'er? As she said that, she pulled Ting'er over and said, Ting'er, don't worry. Nothing will go wrong. She then glared at Ling Zhan with a look of warning. It was obvious that she was trying to say, old thing, if you are going to injure my grandson today, I will definitely teach you a lesson. Ling Tian naturally took note of all this and laughed to himself. As he knelt down on the floor, he raised his neck and said, Grandfather, grandson has something to say. After a few heavy breaths, Ling Zhan's face finally turned gentler as he said, Speak. Ling Tian then said, Today's incident can't be blamed on me. Ling Zhan then scolded, You have beaten your brother Ling Zhen to such an extent and it is not your fault. He then laughed in anger, then when would it be your fault? Don't tell me it will only be your fault when he dies. Vile creature. Ling Tian then retorted, Grandfather, I naturally have my own faults. But since this matter happened, there must be a reason behind it. If there isn't any reason, why would I beat him up for nothing? As Ling Zhan and Ling Xiao were burly men, they did not find anything strange about that statement. But Ling Kong who was by the side looked towards Ling Tian with a solemn expression. Old Madame Ling and Chu Ting'er also looked at each other with faces full of doubt. If those words were spoken out of a grown man's mouth, or even from Ling Zhen, they would not find it too strange. But Ling Tian was only a 5-year-old after all. Facing the reprimanding of his grandfather, he was actually not afraid in the slightest manner. The words he spoke were so logical, showing how something was strange. Ling Zhan then snorted, Continue. Actually, Ling Zhan also found this matter to be extremely strange. Although his own grandson was a little playful, he had never ill-treated the maids in the mansion. Instead, he took care of all the maids in the mansion. Why would he beat his cousin up for nothing? However, what he did not know was that the incident was all planned by Ling Tian so that he could avoid suffering from the forced-feeding education which his grandfather wanted to give him. As for Ling Zhen, he was Ling Tian's unlucky chess piece. Ling Tian's face showed no trace of fear as he said with composure, I definitely made my own mistakes. Today, after finding out I was going to have so many teachers, grandson felt extremely depressed. Right at the moment, Ling Zhen smiled at me. I thought that he was mocking me and so I gave him a kick. This was my mistake, and my only mistake. The things which happened after was just something Ling Zhen deserved and I have no guilt in my heart. Ling Zhan was enraged, oh. Little bastard. You beat your cousin up to such an extent and you still sound as though you are right. Besides, Ling Zhen is your elder cousin, son of your second uncle. It is disrespectful for you to call his name directly. Ling Tian then replied calmly, first, when Ling Zhen came here, second uncle said that Ling Zhen is my study attendant. Grandfather, grandmother, father, mother and second uncle can all be the witness to this. Since he is my study attendant, he is a subordinate. Being a young master, what is wrong with punishing my subordinate? You vile creature. You're just quibbling. Ling Zhan was fuming. But he had nothing to say. After all, the arrangement of Ling Zhen being a study attendant was something Ling Kong insisted on to ensure that the statuses of Ling Tian and Ling Zhen were rightfully arranged. Everyone present heard Ling Kong say that. Although he knew that Ling Tian was just quibbling, Ling Zhan had nothing to retort. Ling Tian then continued, second, I could not control my emotions and kicked Ling Zhen once. I was sincerely extremely regretful and wanted to help him up. But at that very moment, Ling Zhen scolded me. Furthermore, the words he used were just too ugly. Being a child in the Ling family, I cannot endure this scolding which relates to my parents and ancestors. Thus, I beat him up in anger. Everyone's face then turned black. Extremely ugly. Related to his parents and ancestors. Ling Kong felt that things were going wrong. If this brat were to continue talking, then won't my son be beaten up for nothing? Instead, he may even end up being in the wrong. Before Ling Kong had a chance to stop Ling Tian's crisp voice had already sounded. When Ling Tian was trying to get up, he scolded, son of a b*tch. You dare to hit me. Ling Tian actually imitated the vicious look on Ling Zhen's face when he said it with perfection. Mr. Qin can be the witness to this matter. Chapter 18. Deep Schemes. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 18. Deep Schemes. Translator David T. Editor. Cell. On one side, the poor old teacher could not help but furiously blink his eyes. Listening to how the little fellow was speaking, he vaguely remembered that the situation was not like how Ling Tian had described, or at least it was not fully true. He had the feeling that Ling Tian was twisting the truth to suit his purpose, mixing black and white. However, he could not exactly pinpoint what was wrong. Seeing Ling Tian act with such righteousness and honesty, and speak with such assurance, the old master suddenly felt a little absent-minded. It was quite clear that this little fellow had started this whole fiasco and even hit an innocent bystander, but he could even twist the truth and make it seem as though he was wronged. This ability he showed in misrepresentation could be said to be out of this world. By absolving himself of all blame in this matter, speaking in a logical and systematic manner, and by laying bare all the facts, this seemed as though he had been made to suffer a grievance beyond the heavens. The old master could only exclaim deeply, this little boy currently speaking seemed to have morphed into the spirit of a sly old fox. How is he still a 5-year-old kid? This. Isn't this too absurd? The crowd simultaneously turned their heads towards Mr. Qin with inquiring looks. Mr. Qin coughed twice while glancing at Ling Tian, before speaking in a low voice, I indeed heard young Master Ling Zhen speaking such words. However, they're after all only children who would spout nonsense when angry, it isn't, cough. The audience was dumbstruck. Black lines formed on all their faces. In this era, respect to seniors and higher authorities was heavily emphasized. If it was as what Ling Tian had described, then the beating he gave was definitely not overboard. No matter if it was with a status as a study attendant or the paternal cousin of Ling Tian, uttering such a sentence was a definite no. Ling Kong might be Ling Zhan's godson, but no matter how respectable his position was, it was still given by the Ling family. In conclusion, Ling Kong and his son were merely servants with privileges. Even if he were to be beaten to death, no one would pity him for insulting the master's son like that. Ling Kong's face changed at this statement, and he kneeled on the floor after taking a step forward and said, Ling Kong has failed to teach his son well. Please punish me, Godfather. Although he was filled with hatred deep inside, he had no other alternative. Since his son had spoken thus, and even had a witness, how could he argue his way out? Looking at Ling Tian, he started to scheme deep in his heart. He now had to recalculate his plans to take into account the little brat's meticulous mind. To think that the simple-minded Ling Zhan and Ling Xiao could produce such a profound and meticulous schemer as a descendant. With a gloomy expression, Ling Zhan remarked, forget it, we will put this aside for the time being. To speak the truth, when Ling Zhan heard that Ling Zhen had spoken such words, he had already begun to rage even before finding out the truth of the matter. Who was Ling Tian? He was the birth son of his own son. Just by his looks, one could tell that his looks were from the same mold as the rest of the family. To think that someone would actually call his grandson a little bastard. Ling Zhan even felt that Ling Tian had let him off with too light a beating. Ling Tian was overjoyed. Since Ling Zhen was not at the scene at that moment, wasn't his words considered the absolute truth? In addition to that, whatever he said was the truth, just that there were some parts which were inconsistent to the case. He did not mention a word about how he had bullied Ling Zhen and goaded him into using those words, but instead drew everyone's attention towards the few words Ling Zhen had used against him. Furthermore, due to the old-fashioned temperament of Mr. Qin, he did not like lying and hiding the truth, and thus would not dispute with nitty details of the situation. In addition, if Mr. Qin were to explain the entire matter in detail and point out that the fault lay with Ling Tian, it would be difficult to predict what attitude Ling Zhan would adopt, simply because Ling Tian was his own grandson. Ling Zhen, being merely the son of his godson, would definitely not have a higher place in his heart. Thus, Ling Tian believed that Mr. Qin would figure this out no matter how stupid he might be. If Mr. Qin really revealed the truth and explained why Ling Zhen had used that particular word, he would not be punished too harshly. But this would leave an impression that Mr. Qin was trying to sow discord between Ling Tian and his grandfather. Once that sort of impression is formed, then Mr. Qin would not have a good time in the empire and his reputation would hit the gutters. This would be in addition to offending a behemoth like the Ling family. Ling Tian had already accurately predicted Mr. Qin's thoughts, and like he thought, Mr. Qin's reaction was no different from his hypothesis. However, the most wonderful part was actually Ling Tian's plan to admit his wrongdoing the moment he opened his mouth, and to admit he was at fault in the first place, even going so far as to explain his thoughts. Ling Zhan and the rest of the elders would definitely empathize with him. Imagine an unrestrained 5-year-old suddenly having so many masters and coaching classes forced upon him, restricting his freedom. This would of course make anyone unhappy. Even an adult might not accept it so easily, let alone a child. This was also a way for Ling Tian to send out a message. That to a 5-year-old child, such a timetable was too demanding and ridiculous for him. This was mainly directed towards his grandmother and mother. As for his grandfather and father, he did not expect those two blockheads to understand his underlying meaning. He only hoped that his father and grandfather would be able to understand the fact that Ling Zhen had insulted him, and moreover in a very nasty manner. That was enough. The family looked at each other in dismay, with no one knowing what to do next. At this time, old Madame Ling coughed twice lightly before saying, Ling Kong, how about you make a visit to little Zhen and check out his injuries? Take good care of him. The physician has not replied us yet, and this makes this old lady worry. This was obviously an attempt to send him away, with the underlying reason being. This is now an internal family matter and we do not need you to interfere. A flash of resentment appeared across Ling Kong's eyes, before he lowered his head and respectfully replied, yes. Then this child will take his leave. For the grievance inflicted upon young Master Tian today, this child will definitely go back and discipline his son well. Madame Ling replied in a magnanimous manner, let's forget about it. After all, they're still children and do not know propriety. Having been outside for so many years, you must have also suffered quite a bit. Take this chance to get a good rest and rejuvenate yourself. This sentence was quite amusing, saying that because they were children that they did not know how to behave themselves. In other words, Madame Ling implied that by forgetting about the insult, Ling Kong should also forget about the fact that Ling Tian beat up his son. Of course, Ling Kong understood the meaning, and could only express his thanks in return before retreating from the room. Mr. Qin was in no way slow-witted. He realized that someone of his status should not be dallying any longer in this place and took this chance to salute the heads, saying, "Duke Ling, old Madame Ling in great general, this old man is also rather tired, could I?" Madame Ling gave a gentle chuckle, saying, "Mr. Qin need not be so polite. Men, please show Mr. Qin to the guest room." Those not involved all retreated without any exceptions, and only the immediate Ling family members were left. Ling Tian was still kneeling on the floor, but seeing the opportunity present itself, he took the chance to fidget a little, letting an expression of anguish flash across his face. Chu Ting'er was heartbroken to the point that her tears were threatening to fall and glanced towards the madam with pleading eyes. Madame Ling asked in displeasure, "What are you looking at this old lady for? Can't you see that my darling grandson is still kneeling on the floor? Are you not going to ask him to get up?" Chu Ting'er exulted at that and hurriedly replied, "Many thanks to mother." At this time, Ling Tian stood up even before his mother helped him up. Throwing himself into his grandmother's bosom, he clung onto her neck like an octopus, exclaiming, "Grandma is the best." While pretending to act like a small kid, goosebumps rose all over his body. Madame Ling hugged her grandson, beaming all over as she said, "You sly little fellow, always having such a sweet mouth. You only know how to please your grandmother." Ling Xiao snorted, "Mother, this brat has been so stubborn. He needs to receive some form of punishment. Else, if next time he develops a habit of throwing tantrums, then how would we solve it?" Madame Ling opened her eyes wide at her son as she scolded, "You were 10 times more obstinate and naughty than him when you were young. Didn't you still become a great general? Regarding the teaching of children, you think this old lady still needs you to instruct me? You better shut your mouth." Hearing this, Ling Zhan too could not help but snort. But as he opened his mouth, the old lady had already shifted her death stare over, continuing the barrage, "Old fogey, what are you snorting for? Just look at you, old killer, how dare you let my grandson kneel for such a long time? Look, his knees are all red. Aya, come let grandma blow on it. Does it still hurt? Aya, what a good boy my Tianer is. Ah! Tianer's knees are all red. Do they hurt? Come, let mother rub them for you." Looking at the two women in their family with smiles stretching to the corners of their eyes, asking about Ling Tian's well-being, the two males, Ling Zhan and Ling Xiao, looked at each other and simultaneously rolled their eyes. They couldn't help but be suffused with the feeling of powerlessness and defeat. How exactly did today's matters devolve to such a situation in the end? Nightfall. Ling Tian lay comfortably on his bed with his eyes closed. No one had any idea as to what he was thinking about. Today's matters were actually a test developed by Ling Tian himself. Admittedly, one of the reasons was that he was uninterested in all the teachers that were hired. However, the biggest reason of that deliberate tantrum was actually to give a warning to the Ling Kong and Sun pair. No matter what sort of status Ling Kong held, be it Ling Zhan's godson or the head butler of the house, what was supposed to be his would be given, and as for what was not supposed to be his, he could stop dreaming about obtaining it. Today's actions were to inform the father-son pair that no matter the case, he, Ling Tian, was the actual grandson of Ling Zhan, and thus the first in line to succeed the Ling family. Even if he were to be unreasonable and beat up Ling Zhen, what of it? In the end, the master of the house was still the master and a servant would always remain a servant. A master of the house would never give a serious penalty to another master for an action against a servant. This Ling Kong wanted to occupy his seat. He could stop dreaming. If you, Ling Kong, are able to see the big picture and live honestly from now on, I might still leave you and your son a path to live. If you want to stubbornly persist in your ways, then I, Ling Tian, will not have the patience to warn you a second time. What waits upon you is only destruction and ruin. I only give chances once. As for those who do not know how to cherish it, I definitely will not give them another chance. Ling Tian thought to himself deep in his heart with his eyes closed. Seeing that it was getting late, his mother also started to make her way back to her room. From afar, his parents' room lights were already off. Outside the house, the faint sound of snoring could be heard from the servant girl, Chiu Yu. Ling Tian smiled to himself as he reached under the bed and drew out a bundle, taking out a set of black clothes meant for night travel. In a flash, a masked figure in a black suit made its way out from the window, similar to a bird flying across the open sky or the wind blowing across the treetops. He did not bring with him any form of light source, merely skimming and weaving in the air as he gracefully twisted and turned. He stole quietly towards the residence where Ling Kong and his son lived. Chapter 19. Malicious Father and Son. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 19. Malicious Father and Son. Translator. David T. Editor. Sell. The cold winds blew mercilessly in one's face. With the abrupt stop of the snowfall, the sky and earth was left in a blanket of silvery white color. Ling Tian felt like giving himself a nice tight slap. At that moment, he could not have been more depressed. Looking at the pure white snow all around him, all other colors except white were reflected under the effects of the snow and appeared to be extremely provoking to the eye. And out of all colors possible, Ling Tian was dressed in full black. Ling Tian felt as though his mind had short-circuited. He let out a mocking laugh directed at himself. It seemed like his thoughts still followed a certain methodology, and certain choices were subconscious. Following which, Ling Tian, who was running along the eaves of the building, silently stopped as his mocking laugh from before made him recall something. Even though he had close to 30 years of experience, compared to those crafty old foxes in this world, his experiences were moot. After all, most of his experiences came from another world and he was the only one in this current world with those experiences. If he were to retain such innate habits and take things for granted, only disaster awaits him at the end. His style of thinking and methodology needs to be changed. His past self only faced the influence of a family's direct descent and yet was already pushed into a disadvantageous situation, having to endure excessive sufferings. However, what he faced currently was not just the internal strife within the family, but also the problem of his family's existence and other families with equal power. In fact, what he had to face in these clearly troubled times were not just a few families or countries, but the entire world. In this life, although his current situation looked rather peaceful, in reality, it had already long exceeded his previous life in terms of viciousness. At the slightest wrong move, he would die and have his soul dispersed, with his family clan becoming history. As such, he had no choice but to exercise prudence. One must know that by bringing memories of 2 lifetimes to this world, what one grasped would ensure that he would not end up being mediocre. His abrupt rise would not be a coincidence, but rather, an inevitable truth. However, once he rises up, he would have to face those forces which he had thought of. Shaking his head, Ling Tian dissipated the distressing thoughts that were accumulating in his head. An indifferent smile spread across his face. Since that is the case, then I, Ling Tian, will start to muster my energy to play a good game with this world. This made Ling Tian recall a famous novel he had read in his previous life. The protagonist had once said, "Whoever is the most vicious gets to live the longest." The first time Ling Tian read that novel, he was merely 13 years old. At that time, he could not fully comprehend the underlying meaning behind that phrase. He only realized the true meaning of that phrase when his martial arts were crippled and when all hopes he had turned into dust. The reason why he had been forced into that circumstance was because of his soft-heartedness. if he had used all his strength to fight in order to obtain what was rightfully his but ultimately failed, his ending would not be as wretched as his current one. However, this was not the only case. Ling Tian's opponents had also committed the same mistake of being soft-hearted and died because of it. They should have wiped him off the face of the earth after crippling his cultivation. However, by being merciful, they ultimately allowed a crippled Ling Tian to end in mutual destruction with them. This was akin to digging their own graves. This is a weakness. I will eradicate this weakness. To be limited to thinking of my past life is a form of rigidity, which also means it is a weakness. Both must be changed. Be kind-hearted. This shall not happen again. Whoever is my enemy, I will not give him the chance to strike back. Having thought through his point, Ling Tian suddenly felt his body relax, as though he had broken through some form of fetters in his heart. Letting out a breath of elation which appeared in this chilly weather as a cloud of white fog, Ling Tian's body soared through the air, revolving once before disappearing. East Striding Court. Deep into the night. Inside the inner chambers sat a huge brazier and a badly battered, panda-eyed Ling Zhen lay wrapped up in a thin quilt on the bed. His upper torso was bare, revealing patches of bruises. At Ling Zhen's side, Ling Kong held an ointment on one hand, with the other a bundle of gauze, helping his son to change his medicinal wrappings. Tonight was already the second time changing the wrappings. While groaning on the bed, Ling Zhen looked at his father, his little eyes filled with resentment, and said, "Father, this matter cannot be forgotten so easily." Ling Kong arranged the gauze on his hands while saying, "Of course we can't just forget this matter. Today's matters are covered in a veil of strangeness. Zhener, yesterday, when I had sent you to meet with that kid, didn't you mention that he was very warm towards you? Why is it that such a matter happened in just half a day?" Touching on this matter, Ling Zhen could not help but feel depressed and said, "I, too, don't know what exactly happened. Everything was so sudden. That little bastard suddenly acted as though he was crazy and started hitting me, and there was nothing to preempt me." Hearing this, Ling Kong's face was suffused with a sinister smile. This little bastard ought to die. This kind of abnormal behavior can only be a devil's play. It was just as I thought. Ling Zhen questioned in puzzlement, "Does father also think that this little bastard was behaving abnormally today?" Ling Kong replied as he revealed an eerie smile, "Father is not saying that this little bastard was acting out of the ordinary today, but that this little bastard has not been ordinary ever since he was born. Ever since that Chu Tinger entered the Ling house, I have secretly ordered people to put air-severing grass into her food. Any woman who has eaten this herb will not be able to conceive for the rest of their lives. But who knows what kind of problem occurred that she managed to give birth to this little bastard." As he spoke, his face grew more and more miserable. Ling Zhen suddenly sat upright, his expression showing excitement to the point that it turned ruddy, and replied, "If that's the case, then how is it possible that this kid is their birth child? Could it be that they had secretly adopted him? If that's the case, as long as we focus on this advantage, the Ling family will still belong to us." Ling Kong then replied with a disappointed sigh, "This kid is definitely Ling Xiao and Chu Tinger's child. That year, when I heard that Chu Tinger had gotten pregnant, I thought that it was impossible too, so I went to all lengths to kidnap the family of a famous doctor in the capital named Yi Menghuai, and got him to diagnose her condition in the Ling family. If the matter was proven false, I would have already made you the successor of the Ling family. However, after Yi Menghuai's examination, he really confirmed that such a matter existed." Ling Zhen's face was ruthlessly vicious at this point. "This could be because Yi Menghuai had colluded with the Ling family, and we can't rule out this possibility." Ling Kong could only smile bitterly in return. "I had also considered this problem, and thus I got another 6 doctors to come to the Ling family to diagnose. All of them said that same thing, that she was indeed pregnant. However, when I had decided to stake it all and get someone to poison her to death, settling the matter once and for all, the chance was already gone. When I was still unprepared, the child had already been born. Ling Kong could only let out a long sigh and he viciously punched the bedside. His eyes were full of insanity as he continued, but we still have a chance. As long as I can find an opportune time and get rid of that little bastard without leaving any tracks, then the Ling family will still be mine. Ling Zhen's childish features flashed a wicked look. In the depths of his eyes lurked an insanity no lesser than that of his father. After a moment of silence in the room, Ling Kong suddenly laughed sinisterly, saying, after that little bastard was born, the Northwest Horse Ranch had also reached a critical point, and that old fogey sent me over to supervise. All these years, I haven't had the chance to deal with that little bastard. However, after 5 years of hard work, the entire Northwest Ranch now belongs to both of us, father and son. Ha ha ha, this Northwest Ranch is one of the main sources of income for the Ling family. With such a strong pillar behind me, as long as I start to stir things up here, then, he. The room was filled with sinister and treacherous laughter from the father-son pair, as though the entire Ling family had already fallen into both of their hands. Following which, they continued with some idle conversation, such as how to completely take control of the Ling family, as well as how to settle the remaining family members, so on and so forth. Chapter 20. Late Night Conversation. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 20. Late Night Conversation. Translator David T. Editor. Cell. Just as Ling Kong and his son Ling Zhen were lost in their delusions while happily daydreaming, a black-colored object floated away at the rooftop where both father and son were talking, much like a cloud, soundlessly disappearing into the night. In that same night, another secret conversation was held in Ling Tian's parents' room. Chu Ting'er snuggled up against her husband's embrace, with one of her white and fair arms sticking out of the blanket. Her lovable face was dripping with sweat as she panted, "Xiaoji, what do you think of Tianer's performance today?" 1. Ling Xiao lay there bare-chested, revealing muscles that looked as though they were crafted from granite. After the exercise, he lay contentedly on the pillow with narrowed eyes, looking as though his soul had flown elsewhere. However, upon hearing the words uttered by his wife, he distractedly stared at her for a while before raging, "That little bastard, he behaved totally without control and discipline today. This is too much. I am going to give him a good lesson tomorrow." Chu Ting'er only lightly laughed as she stretched out her first finger and drew circles on her husband's chest while she breathily said, "You, always being such a blockhead. Couldn't you see that Tianer mannerisms and way of speaking were far above a normal 10-year-old child? At first glance, today's matters would appear to be Tianer causing a tantrum. However, this little guy can twist the truth such that an unjustified matter becomes as though he had suffered some great grievance. Don't you feel this is very abnormal?" Furrowing his brows, Ling Xiao carefully thought about it before he realized that there was something different about it. That is true, he is just a 5-year-old kid, how can he be able to speak so eloquently? It's to the point where he managed to silence the family members as well as Mr. Qin, making everyone dance to his tune. Looks like our child seems to be a genius-level character. Chu Ting'er's face was full of pride. Of course, how could my son be an ordinary character in a generation? The corners of Ling Xiao's mouth tugged upwards in a weird smile, and with both his hands itching forward under the blankets, he suddenly grabbed onto the bountiful globes sticking out proudly from Chu Ting'er's chest. Applying a bit of force, both of the soft white humps were depressed based on the imprint of his fingers, as he lecherously spoke, "Your son. Without me, how could you have given birth?" With a lovable moan, Chu Ting'er suddenly lost strength in her entire body, and her eyes started to blur as she began to pant delicately while saying, "You bad man. While I'm here talking about serious matters, you just had to play dirty tricks." Oh. At this time, one of Ling Xiao's hand decided to go for a change in position and started to explore down south. Chu Ting'er started to tremble all over her body, and buried her face that was flushed red in embarrassment into her husband's embrace. Ling Xiao sniggered as he said, "Isn't this part of a serious matter? And with a flip of his body. A long while later, Chu Tinger let out a satisfied sigh, using a slender hand to push aside the hair on the forehead that was matted with sweat. Although her face was flushed red with exertion, the corners of the mouth revealed a blissful smile. Sprawling on her husband like a kitten, she said, "Xiao Ji, Tinger can die of blissfulness." Ling Xiao, however, lay there paralyzed like a pile of mud and exhaled heavily as he said, "You can die from bliss, but I will die from fatigue. I almost lost all strength here. My little baby, you bewitching girl. Hateful." Chu Tinger displayed shyness and anger, yet was secretly delighted as she lightly hit him. Her eyes blurred with tenderness and love, as if tears were about to fall. Seeing that incomparably seductive look on his beloved's face, Ling Xiao nearly transformed into a wolf there and then. Be more serious. I'm talking to you about Tian'er." Chu Tinger knew that her husband was not able to resist her charms and immediately burrowed into the covers, only revealing her charming little head. Seems like Tian'er's performance today is far exceeding my expectations." Ling Xiao muttered irresolutely. Definitely, regarding how Tian'er behaved today, even as his mother, I was surprised and even shocked. Tian'er's intelligence has already exceeded my expectations. Chu Tinger revealed a face of concern and worry. It should be a good thing that Tian'er is intelligent and witty. What are you worried about? Ling Xiao was flabbergasted at his wife. Chu Tinger let out a face of contemplation as she pondered, "Xiao Ji, don't you feel that Tian'er today was too smart and wily? If a child is smart, I should be happy as the mother, but if he is too smart, it would be easy for him to walk down the wrong path. Furthermore, a higher intelligence means that it will not be easy to discipline him, don't you feel so?" Ling Xiao said with a gleeful expression, "Why would there be such a problem? Among our Ling family's ancestors, including my father and I, we were all gutsy and boorish men. Never once did a strategist appear in the family. Now that we finally have a genius in the family, Tinger, this could be said to be all your credit." As he spoke, Ling Xiao's eyes became lecherous once again, and that pair of lecherous hands also started to stir. Chu Tinger helplessly stared at her husband, half wanting to laugh and half wanting to be angry. But after a long while, she instead let out a sigh, jabbing her finger at her husband's head, saying, Speaking with you is just like playing a harp to a cow." Ling Xiao snickered as his sturdy body once again pounced over, and Chu Tinger could only try her utmost to prevent the invasion of his lecherous hands as she gasped, wait a moment, I'm not done. For Ling Tian to be so smart, father is actually wasting his time to find so many tutors to coach him, and I'm worried that he would be fed up with it. Woo, you bad boy. As Ling Xiao invaded the capital, he vaguely mumbled, "Don't worry, tomorrow I will speak with father about this." Whoa, so smooth. What occurred next naturally turned the room into a place of spring. As Ling Tian soundlessly thread his way out of his underground chamber, he felt a little strange. Every night, around this time, his mother would brave all winds and rain to make her way to his room to check up on him, so why had she not turned up today? Regarding how loving his parents were, Ling Tian was deeply aware and suffered many times because of it. Before he was 3, the two of them treated him like how they would do to an ordinary infant, and were not discreet in doing their stuff. Thus, every night became a form of torture to Ling Tian, and yet, because he was in the body of an infant, he was unable to voice out his own thoughts. Seeing his parents beside him making love without a care for Ling Tian beside them, Ling Tian felt depressed to the point of dying. Oh heavens, I'm someone who has lived for 2 lifetimes and 20-odd years as a virgin. Those few years, when they woke up, although their parents seemed to be in great vitality, Ling Tian always appeared drowsy with a lack of vigor. He was always afraid that he would either die of a massive nosebleed or a heart attack. This matter continued until the point where Ling Tian celebrated his 4th birthday. When asked what gift he would like for his birthday, he immediately chose to sleep apart from his parents without any hesitation. He even went to the extra mile to ensure that his room was a little further apart from his parents and was resolute about his decision. Hence, his family members could only accede to his request and employed a few nannies and servant girls to attend to his needs. From then on, after sleeping on his own, Ling Tian unexpectedly became more robust, which made the family amazed and feel at ease. Under Ling Tian's insistence, they also allowed him to push out those nannies from this strange young master's room. This was of course a given. Without at least 3 times of nightly sexual harassment, Ling Tian was feeling much better physically and mentally. As Ling Tian secretly rejoiced, he was also in awe of his father's exuberant prowess. When no one was looking, he would secretly open up his pants and examine his JJ, fantasizing if he would inherit this sort of godly vigor. Every time this happened, a weird licentious giggle would sound out from the lone room which Ling Tian stayed in, and this would always cause goosebumps to form as well as shivers down the spine of those servant girls who were staying nearby and heard it. Ling Tian's decision made his mother, Chu Tinger, extremely sad and worn out. Out of worry, she checked on Ling Tian every day, resulting in Ling Xiao being unable to satisfy his lust for a period of time. As such, he was always frowning whenever he saw his son. Ling Tian felt at peace. No matter what, this was better than having a live broadcast every night, was it not? Furthermore, Ling Tian looked at his father in disdain, as he only knew those few styles. How uncreative. Since his mother had not come to check up on him until now, Ling Tian could already foretell that his mother would not be coming. As for the reason, the Buddha says that such a thing must not be spoken. 1. Xiao Ji is an intimate way for Chu Tinger to call Ling Xiao. It also means brother Xiao when translated literally. 2. This is a metaphor of sorts which describes someone who is telling something complicated to a fool, or sometimes, this idiom is used to describe a person who is trying to tell something to the wrong audience.